Hey guys and girls, it's Rusty here from Impact Dynamics, and welcome back for Impact Dynamics Live again on this reloading special Thursday night. We are looking forward to a big show tonight with Steve from Outer Edge Projectiles. It's not so common to have someone who designs projectiles professionally on this show, on any show. There are not too many guys around like that, and we've got one of the best in the country tonight. So looking forward to that. Get your questions ready about running copper projectiles, about outer edge projectiles, and perhaps some projectile-focused reloading questions. Looking very much forward to that. Speaking of projectiles, our sponsor, as you guys will know, especially tonight, is Projectile Warehouse, and you can use the code ID Live with number 5 for 5% off the entire range of the show on the website, and that includes the ever amazing Outer Edge Projectiles, but more on that a little bit later. And guys, if you're in the chat, say good day, tell us what you're up to, how your day's been, all that sort of thing. Who we got in there? GK, Scott, Sheldrake, a few other guys. Yes, Sheldrake, you're here now, we can get underway. Excellent. And to all those watching and not commenting, jump in, let us know, but good to have you on board anyway. Tomorrow night we have Dutchy from the Precision Shooting podcast, so things are going to get pretty chaotic pretty quickly. We will be looking at some videos and memes. We'll be back to some memes tomorrow night, so grab a few beers and let's get ready for that. Sunday night we have a few guests on for the Q&A. We've got Steve's in the chat as well. G'day, Steve. We have Emma is back for another episode, and her husband Andrew, and Scott McScott is joining us as well. So looking forward to that as the crew. And then Monday night we'll be announcing a little new initiative as part of the show with Andrew Little. So stay tuned for that. Start thinking about what you want to do with this time off, but this current time, the situation we find ourselves in. We have some ideas for some plans then. G'day Charles, g'day Dean, g'day Smithy, g'day Dave McDave. G'day Ben, the Long Gun Project is in the house. Have you guys seen his Lithgo video yet? Hopefully you've been watching that, checking that out. It is excellent. And another Scott in the chat as well. Excellent. We've got a few guys going on here, and I wonder if Steve's nervous. He's on the line here. Let's bring him on up. But I've known Steve for a number of years now, and obviously dealing with projectiles, and that's sort of how we cross paths. And Steve is the designer, one of the owners, the man behind Outer Edge Projectiles. And if you haven't used Outer Edge Projectiles, we need him to come in and tell us about it, because first up, they're Australian made. Second, they are made exceptionally well, really consistent. The results that people are getting out of these things are sensational. And I'm looking forward to seeing... So chatting a bit further, be able to share this. I've done a couple of gun shows with Steve, so I've heard a lot of the stuff he has to say, and we can get real deep real quick because the guy knows technical information. He knows what he's talking about, but he also is a shooter, which is super important, and he enjoys testing and trying, and is compassionate to when people have a scenario that they want to achieve. They want to shoot really far away, or they want to hunt big game close in, or they want whatever it is that they want to do. He wants to make that happen with you as well. So it's really good to talk to about projects, about ideas and stuff, and you guys will see that tonight as well. So Steve, hopefully you can hear me. Let's see if he's out in the middle of nowhere, so reception could be challenging, but we'll see how we go. We're going to try for some video work. And Steve, are you there, mate?
I am indeed.
Oh, fantastic.
How are you, Rusty?
I am going well. I've got one beer in hand. I've got you on screen and a bunch of guys saying good day in the chat. So shout out to Mark, Ryan, Ian, Craze88. Great name. Perfect. Excellent. How's your day, week, coronavirus scenario been going?
We've been going nuts. We've had a lot of inquiry.
Yep.
We've had a lot of projects and a lot of excitement, and we are posting some very good and very interesting results.
Yeah.
And to be perfectly honest, it's not really affecting us negatively, other than the fact that many of the shooters just can't get out there. But they're focusing on reloading and other things, and updating their education on the subject. So it's not been a total loss in that regard.
Yeah.
But I've been out in the factory making them every day.
That's exactly right. Excellent. Jonesy's in the chat. Look out! This could go wild. Steve, give us the overview. Like a little bit about yourself and your shooting history, and then leading into where OEP came from, and how we've ended up here today.
Well, I guess I've always been a hunter. I don't know whether you're born, mate, or whatever, but I think the first time I was ever caught hunting, it was by a national parks ranger at the age of 4 down in the national parks, looking for lizards and snakes to take home.
Perfect.
I got caught again at about the age of 12. But it's something that my family couldn't relate to. I've always been a hunter, and my old man swore I was born with a fishing rod in my hand. When I got to school at about the age of 14, I joined the Army Cadets, and they put a rifle in my hand, and then I never looked back.
Yeah, right.
As far as I was concerned, this fishing was for the mugs. I'm going hunting.
Love it.
That seems a lifetime ago, and in many ways it is. But I studied game management at UQ. I then went on to I also went on to work at the game unit in New South Wales. I was a game manager there for a while, and then went on to be the ops manager for a few years. And even though I'm not there anymore, the result of that highlighted a number of things for me, and I think that two really important issues came up in that. And that is that the level of training that many people had could be improved on, and that some of the product that people were using were inappropriate, and it wasn't because of anything other than lack of knowledge, understanding, little ignorance. And when you pointed some of these things out, people got it, they were excited about it, and were happy to step forward into the next level of understanding. And it was from that point I started putting training programs together. And then and people have taken over those training programs since I've left, which is encouraging. And they've brought their own flavour and their own emphases to those training programs, which is fine. And I started focusing on that which worked in the field. And to me, the most important thing in the entire equation doing the job was the bullet.
Yep.
There are two halves to the equation. One is the nut behind the butt delivering it, and the other one is the bullet and what it does when it gets there. You still have to put it in the right place, so there's skill level and training required, but the product has to work as well. You can't have half the story and not the other half.
Yeah, very true. Yeah, very true. So that led you, did that interest then lead you down to researching projectiles?
I was offered an opportunity to work with another bullet manufacturer quite a number of years ago now, and came to the realization that things could still be done better, but I was dealing with a situation where there was a resistance to change, new technology and new understanding, and decided I would sit down and learn the maths and do it myself.
Okay.
Took me 12 years to learn the maths, and when you sit down and look at a bullet, you'd say, something as simple as a bullet can't be that hard. Yeah, it is.
Very good. And so so you then branched out on your own, and that's how Outer Edge started, or how did that come to be?
We started, I was convinced that we were onto a good thing, and did some trial runs with a local manufacturer who had a suitable machine to make pilot and test runs that were suitable for testing and R&D.
Yep.
And the results developed over time, and we came to the point where we believed that we had a vastly superior product. But to do it commercially, we had to invest into a much bigger machine, a much more precise machine. So to the best of my knowledge, this statement is still true, but we invested into a specialised Swiss machine, especially dedicated to the manufacture of projectiles. And to the best of my knowledge, even today, we're the only ones in the Southern Hemisphere that have one.
Yep.
There are others, of course, but they're all in the Northern Hemisphere, and they're primarily focused on the US market.
Okay.
This machine is just brilliant. The tolerances are just unmatchable.
Yeah, fantastic. And so The big question, I know you will get this all the time at the shows and just generally, but the big difference, one of the differences, because I'm sure there's several, but one of the differences that is easy to see around Outer Edge and other manufacturers is the fact that you guys run copper projectiles rather than the commonly copper jacketed with lead shoved in the middle. Why?
Oh, that's a question that's as deep as you want to make it.
Well, I know we can go super deep with it. Give us a little top level as to why you went that path, and we'll see if there's some questions to clarify further.
In summary, I can do things with design and shape and manufacturing process regarding hardness and temper and all the rest of it that you just simply can't do with a jacketed lead projectile.
Mm-hmm.
I can get down to very fine wear flats, incredible tolerances for roundness, incredible concentricity. I can change the shape of a shank because it's not restricted by the use of a die out of which it's got to be extruded.
Mm-hmm.
I can produce very sharp boat tails, which have an enormous improvement on a bullet's BC. Again, you can't do that with a jacketed projectile simply because of the extrusion process. And I can modify the bullet's performance endlessly, whether it's for in-flight or terminal, based entirely on the objective. I can get a bullet to completely expand to more than 100%, maintain its full weight,
yep,
without losing anything, maintain its momentum, maintain its sectional density. Mm-hmm. Many of these things are sacrificed in the jacketed lead projectile or traditional projectile simply because of the limitations of that technology. That technology has come a long way. Don't get me wrong. Some of it's very accurate. Some of it works reasonably well.
Yeah.
But the technology is limited into the shapes it can produce and the terminal performances it can generate.
Fantastic. And so one of the things that you notice with copper projectiles compared to the more traditional ones, I guess, is the weight. The weights are different, or you sort of can't seem to go as heavy. Do you want to just touch on that a little bit?
We can go as heavy,
okay,
but there's a trade-off. A classic example is one of my favourite longer range units is a 30 caliber.
Mm-hmm.
And I use a 215 grain ball bearing tip hollow point projectile, which is just unbelievable. But it requires a very fast twist rate. If you're using a conventional twist rate, say a 300 Winchester Magnum and a 10-inch twist, then your maximum bullet weight would be around about 160 grains in a copper projectile.
Yep.
But if you've got two bullets, one copper and one traditional jacketed lead projectile side by side, and they are the same external dimensions precisely, obviously the lead projectile is going to be around about 18% heavier. It's not the weight that's important. It's what the bullet does when it gets there. So a bullet's displacement is what's terminally important. A bullet's displacement determines the outcome for the animal to be harvested.
Yep.
Now, the other trade-off, and it's a trade-off from the jacketed lead projectile side of the equation, is even though it's heavier to start with, they almost universally end up being lighter to finish with.
Yep.
If I have a 150 grain copper projectile that maintained all its weight on impact, it's still a 150 grain projectile. But if you've got a 180 grain jacketed lead projectile that started off at 180 grain in the magazine, even the best of the core bonded bullets still lose at least 25% of their weight on impact. Yep. So it's no longer a 180 grain bullet when it's doing the job. It's now 150 grainer. The only difference is that the 150 grainer started as 150 grainer and it's lighter and it's quicker and less recoil and it still does the same. In fact, you would always guarantee that a copper bullet, even when it's 100% expanded, is going to penetrate more deeply than a conventional jacketed lead bullet will under almost any circumstances.
Yeah, right. Yeah, so they
comparatively
they hunt well, and we can see that from the photos behind you, and I've certainly seen that banner close up. But what about from a target point of view? I know a lot of guys are running your projectiles for long range work, like real long range work.
People would be horrified at the distances we test our product over. And I don't want to get into a pissing competition over that.
Sure.
Whenever you go to a show, there's always somebody who's shot a smaller group at a further distance, blah, blah, blah. We test our product at distances that most people would find difficult to comprehend. But for long range accuracy, some of the results that we're posting now are shocking, even long-term target specialists and who are now migrating across to some of our projectiles where they're allowed to. One particular fellow sent me a fist-sized group that he shot with his load development rounds at 908 meters, and he said, well, by the time he's finished his load development rounds, that's what he's going to be settling on. Well, that's fantastic.
Yeah, right.
But we've got many groups, the sub 0.2 MOA and about half a dozen the sub 0.1. So it's accuracy of a high standard.
Absolutely. Now we're gonna jump into a couple of questions here. There are some questions. Guys have questions on these topics. I'm gonna pick up with the latest question because it's most relevant to what we've just been talking about, and then we'll go back further up. So, guys, if you have asked questions, we will come to them. Ian asks, being a lighter projectile, I guess comparative for the size, doesn't the wind blow it around a lot more?
That's an exceptionally good question. And it comes down to the relationship between velocity and ballistic coefficient. And the short answer, Ian, is it depends on the discrepancy between the velocity and the discrepancy in the BC. If the velocity is a lot greater, but the BC is down a little bit, then the advantage is actually with the lighter bullet. But if the discrepancy is huge on the BC and the velocity is minor, then obviously the advantage is going to go with the heavier bullet.
Yep.
We have, if you go weight for weight, our 215 grain 30 cal projectiles have a BC that is vastly superior to the 230 grainer from a well-known competitor.
Yep.
And it's going a hell of a lot quicker. So yes, it's a lighter bullet, but it's got a higher BC and a higher velocity, so it trumps it hands down under all circumstances.
Yeah.
But when you step into the more standard or conventional world of common factory twist rates, it's amazing that people don't understand the tipping point. And a classic example of that tipping point comes down to let's use the common 6.5 Creedmoor.
Sure.
There are bullets with a much heavier and much better BC than the 130 grainer in a 6.5 Creed. But when you look at the velocities and the BCs that are achieved in all of those bullets, the difference between them downrange is so small that it's ridiculous. And sometimes, like the 156 grainer in the Burger, the BC is absolutely phenomenal, but you can't drive it hard enough to take advantage of it, and you're actually better off in the 6.5 Creed with 130 grainer, even if you're going burger to burger, let alone going ours. So if the 130 grain Burger is the tipping point for weight in a traditional bullet, in a copper bullet, that's going to be around about 112, 113 grains, because your shape, your BC, and your velocity is in the same ballpark as the 130 grainer, whether it's a Burger or a Quantity or a Sierra.
Yep.
And whilst a lot of people challenge that, when they put it through their programs, not all the American manufacturers' BCs are as honest as they might be.
Yep.
It is true that the Burger BCs are very accurate, and the Sierras are also very accurate, but they would be about the only two that I would acknowledge as being on the money with their BCs. Ours are certainly on the money with their BCs, and we can demonstrate that both in terms of calculation and measurement. But some of the others, and in fact, a well-known ballistician by the name of Dave Emery, who just left Hornady as the chief ballistician, said that the overwhelming majority of American manufacturers overstate their BCs, and he nominated a figure as much as 10%.
Yeah, right.
We've measured many of our competitors' product, and with the exception of the Sierras and the Burgers, many of them are overstated between 5 and 10%.
Okay. Very good. Good question as well. Guys, keep them coming. Let's go back and we're going to go through a couple in the order that came in, Steve. Can your bullets be used in standard throat lengths, or do they need something specific?
They were all designed, all our bullets were designed around the SAMI CIP standard. So if they're designed for, if you've got a factory 6.5 crude, our 113 grain BBT will work perfectly in it because that's what it was designed for. We know what the specs are, and we made the bullet to meet those specifications. You will note in our range that we've got a 6.5 that is 112 grain hollow point.
Yep.
And many people will ask, why would you have 112 and 113? Well, the short answer, as quickly as I can, or succinctly as I can make it, is that the throat lengths between different 6.5 cartridges are quite wide, and many people don't know that. So a classic example is the 6.5 by 47. Yep. It has a throat jump of around about 2.5 to 6 millimeters. The throat jump on a 6.5 Creedmoor is about 4.7. So for the bullet to work in those throats, the shapes have to be different.
Yep.
So when we've now got to the point where we don't just describe the bullet by caliber and weight and twist and all the rest of it. We actually are now going through the process of nominating which cartridge that bullet was actually specifically designed for.
Yeah, fascinating. Yeah, okay. Excellent.
If you don't mind, Rusty, I'll go back to Ian's question regarding light pills being blown around more.
Yeah, sure.
I have a rough rule of thumb for people to use there. For a heavier, higher BC bullet to be superior to a lighter bullet, if the discrepancy in velocity is more than 200 feet a second, the BC has to be 15% higher.
Okay. Yep. Yeah, follow that. Yeah. So if it's
but it has to be an honest BC, not a published BC.
Yeah, got that. That actually follows up with a question a little bit further down that asks, what's better, speed or BC? But I think you've sort of covered that. It's not as simple as one or the other. There's this balancing act that exists between the two.
That's exactly right. Look, velocity does trump BC, but it depends on the magnitude of the discrepancies in the velocity and the BC.
Yep. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. Very good. All right. Conservative Sniper Hunter wants to know: do you make any 25 cal or 270 cal sleek match grade bullets? Now he's got specific weights there, but what do you do? Sort of match stuff in those calibers, if anything.
We don't do anything for target shooting in those calibers. We got dedicated hunting projectiles for those in various weights, and they can be used, and they're exceptionally accurate. Certainly accurate enough to be used in competition. But we don't. But it is a good question in one sense, in that the hollow point and the ball bearing tip bullets are more expensive to make. So then they may not be cost effective for competition, but they're good enough to use in competition.
Yes. Yep.
Can we use 20? Can we make 25 and 270 cals for competition? Yes, we can. The only reason we haven't is we haven't had sufficient demand for it. Yep. But putting that to one side for a moment, the demand. I've had customers. Admittedly government customers, what have you, who've come to me with a set of parameters and said we need something to perform in a particular way. The formulas and the mathematics that we use now, despite the complexity and the 5-way simultaneous equation and the computer systems that we need to run, what used to take us 3 months to design on paper can now be done in 15 minutes.
Wow. Okay. That's a change.
And so this request came to us on a Thursday.
Yep.
And was dispatched to the customer on the Monday.
Wow. Okay. Yep. Yeah. So I imagine there's obviously a level of scale that needs to happen in a demand as such. But being local, 2 being copper, you guys can turn around concepts and ideas if the person has the backing to do so quickly and be flexible. So if enough people wanting something, it can be done.
Well, that's exactly right. See, it doesn't matter what style of projectile you require out of a copper bar. You don't have to change the tools. It's not like a jacketed or a traditional projectile where you've got to go and make a set of dies.
Yep.
Which is both laborious, slow, and costly. We change nothing other than the program. So it's possible to change a design or add a design to the equation if there is sufficient demand very, very quickly.
Yeah, cool.
But obviously it takes a back seat to existing demand.
Absolutely. Excellent. So another one here. Any noticeable impact that you've seen with the difference between, the question here is small rifle primers and large rifle primers, but perhaps that's within the same case in your projectiles. I mean,
it's a good question regarding small rifle primers.
Yep.
We haven't done sufficient testing with small rifle primer options to give a sensible guideline there. All the testing that we have done is if the cartridge was originally designed with a specific primer, that is the primer that we use in all our testing. But there is definitely a switching point there regarding an improvement from one to the other. The problem with going from a large rifle primer to a small rifle primer is that most people don't realise that you have to change your firing pin. A small rifle primer requires a finer firing pin to work properly all the time.
Yep.
And if that cartridge, say the 6.5 Creed, came with an option of a large rifle and a small rifle, my first question would be, what firing pin?
On matches, and it's not fun. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, you run the risk of piercing and and pressure surges and egress, and it's not a pretty sight.
No, not at all. Would you describe, this one's coming from Ben, would you describe your bullets as having a tangent ogive, secant, or a hybrid?
The overwhelming majority of our products are hybrid ogives.
Yep.
Some, there's probably, I'm plucking a rabbit out of a hat or a hair out of a, never mind. About 15% of them would be straight tangent.
Okay.
All of our bullets have a tangent engagement with the lands. Many of our bullets have a secant ogive.
Okay. Yep.
We don't have a pure secant ogive product in our range.
Okay. Yep.
And it all comes down to sensitivity of jump to the lands and the load development. They're just too finicky to worry about.
Well, that will bring us to our next couple of questions. There is I'll give them to you as an overall, and you can probably answer a few in one go. Do your bullets seem to have a seating depth they perform best at? And they seem quite long. Is there any issues with impeding on the amount of powder when loading to magazine length? And do you need to run faster powders to accommodate for that sort of thing?
Whoa! How about we start with number one?
Let's do that. Absolutely. Let's talk about seating depth, and then that'll lead into the next one.
Copper bullets have been known for a very long time to have a starting point jump to the lands of around about 50 thou or 1.27 millimeters.
Yep.
And it doesn't matter whether they're ours or anybody else's. If you're starting low development with copper bullets, that's where you should be starting. And then you might come down 5 thou or up 5 thou, but you're going to be very, very close to your sweet spot at around about that point.
Okay.
But it's a really good question, because there's a great deal of research has landed on the table in the last few days regarding traditional bullet testing and ideal jump to the lands, because there's been this factoidal view that bullets will always perform best either suited into the lands in, say, an F-class or a bench rest type rifle, or very close to it. And there's been a huge body of research conducted by some very well qualified people over the last couple of years that challenges that notion. They have demonstrated that, yes, super tiny bug holes have been shot with very tiny, with either suited into the lens or just off the lens. Yep. But they were equally able to demonstrate that those loads were very sensitive. They tended to be very sensitive to charge weight and very sensitive to temperature.
Yep.
The next nodal point for jump came back normally between 35 and 55 thou, and most commonly around 45 to 50 thou. And those loads were also extremely accurate, but much more tolerant of changes in minor changes in powder density and temperature. Mm-hmm. So there's a considerable case that should be considered that all bullets, regardless of type, should be experimented with at around about that 50 thou jump first. Mm. I know it's controversial, but the evidence is mounting, and it's I haven't seen any evidence to disprove it yet.
Fascinating. And I guess that leads into Steve's question about loading to magazine length. Well, if you're starting further back anyway, it's actually in your favour. But is there any issues with impeding the amount of powder you could use when loading them sort of further back?
Well, given that our bullets, if you were talking weight for weight, that might be an issue. But if you remember the displacement relationship of around about 20%, 18.5 it is actually, instead of using a 180 grain projectile for the same displacement, you should be using a 150 grain projectile. So it's into the its case of capacity intrusion is not anywhere near as much as you might think. But because it's a lighter projectile, you will often want to use a faster powder to get it moving, and to also burn all the powder rather than spill half of it out the end of the barrel onto the ground. And in fact, burn rate is a very significant and important issue, because it influences barrel wear in many, many ways. Mm-hmm. And that's another subject we'll go down if people want to go down that path.
Sure, no problems, mate. Did you have any experience with brass projectiles at all? Someone's asking about the difference between brass or copper.
Yeah, we did a lot of experimentation there and backed away from brass for a couple of reasons. Mm-hmm. Brass has a lower specific gravity, which means it's lighter again. And there comes a tipping point between the relationship between specific gravity and sectional density and the flexibility that allows you in bullet shape. We found brass had too many discounting challenges to pursue it further. Okay. One of them, apart from the reduction of the specific gravity, was that being harder, to reduce pressures, they often had to be made slightly undersized, which we found problematic.
Okay.
And that combination had a very negative influence on longer range shooting, It was not quite so important out to 100 metres. But once you started extending your shots from beyond 400 metres, they were out of the race.
Mm. Okay.
So it's a horses for courses. There's not, if you want to use brass projectiles inside of 200 metres, and they're working for you, you keep doing it. But it's not the best material, in my view, for either hunting or target shooting.
Yeah, no problem. There's a couple of questions coming in about coatings, because yours are known for being a very dark coating, not looking like copper. And most people assume that is a moly coating, which I can see the look in your eyes when I say moly, you fire up, and for good reason. But there's the question about what's the advantage of the coating, and what the question that I guess is answered by that. What do you do to combat the tarnishing of copper?
Okay, the tarnishing of the copper could be addressed in many ways, and we didn't actually see that as being specifically important. Mm-hmm. The coating is primarily there for one reason and one reason alone: to make the bullets according to the diameter specification requirements of CIP and SAMI. Shapes had to be changed, and a dry lubricant had to be applied to get the shot start initiation pressures down to what we would consider traditional or normal or acceptable. Mm-hmm. The shot start initiation for a conventional or a traditional bullet is 3,620 odd PSI. Yeah. For us to get a copper bullet down to that level, we had to apply dry lubricant coating. Now, you're quite right, we don't use moly. And never will. It's just too difficult to clean and can build up in your barrel, and has just, it can work, but it's got too many discounts to it. And we prefer to use the product that we've developed and use. It doesn't build up, and it will clean out with one or two passings of whatever it is you use as your normal cleaning agent. You don't need to use anything special. I mean, yes, we sell stuff to remove it from your barrel, but I don't care what you're using. Whatever it is you're using, it'll strip out with that anyway, and it won't, and you won't have to do it for half an hour. It'll be coming out in just a couple of minutes.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Fantastic. Is a good question for you. How stable are your bullets at longer ranges?
What a wonderful, wonderful question.
Thought you might like talking about that.
Yeah. Look, when a bullet is designed, there are a number of trade-offs. Mm-hmm. There are a number of value judgments that are made. And our bullets were designed to be stable across the entire flight path, particularly in the target shooting side of the equation. Yep. And I split it into two halves for two reasons. A hunting bullet is only going to be effective down to the level, the velocity at which it will expand. If the bullet's going to expand somewhere between 1,600 and 1,800 feet per second, then it needs to be stable out to the distance that velocity will generate. Does that make sense?
Yep.
With a target bullet, your objective is not to kill an animal. It's to put a nice little neat round hole in the target, closer to the center than everybody else. For that to happen, the bullet has to be stable across its entire flight path. Now, for the target shooters of my era, there's a well-known scenario regarding the 168 grain Sierra target projectile. Mm-hmm. It was absolutely brilliant out to 600 yards. Come 800 yards, it fell off its twig. It was all over the place. The BC's accelerated and all the rest of it. That's not because the fellas at Sierra didn't know what they were doing. That's because the design parameters that were specified by the military contract were that they wanted a bullet out of a 308 that was going to work to 600 yards and they weren't going to assess the outcomes beyond that range. So the Sierra made a bullet that worked exceptionally well out to that distance.
Yep.
Because what happened after that wasn't going to be evaluated.
Why would you? Yeah.
Right. So, but our bullets are designed to be stable across the entire flight path, not just a specific focal range. And we do that for a number of reasons. And one of them is that if a bullet is stable, it will be maximizing its theoretical and practical ballistic coefficient.
Yep.
If it falls below its optimal stability range, which is a whole world of interesting maths, and I'll go down that path and down that rabbit warren if you want, but most people will glaze over.
I was going to say, I'm not sure how long we've got, Steve.
We've got an hour, not a week. Where I was going with that is that the bullet, for every 0.1 from the 1.5 standard at launch, that a bullet is not stable, then falls below the standard. Let's say you have a bullet that has a launch millistandard stability of 1.4. It is 0.1 below the benchmark of 1.5. That will roughly discount your optimal BC by 3%. If you go down, if your bullet is at 1.3 stability when it leaves, it's actually now discounted its BC by 6%, not 0.6, by 6%. So your wonderful BC figures are all out the window if your stability isn't right.
Yep.
So we focus primarily on stability because that will optimize whatever BC we can maximize. So we don't map or nominate a bullet stability at launch. We actually map the bullet stability over its entire flight path to ensure that it never falls below a critical standard at any point.
Yeah, fantastic. I think you've answered the question for now, Steve. I reckon we've got that. But as you said, that is a topic that can go for days. Really.
Ever.
Yeah, absolutely. But hopefully that was from Mark. Mark, hopefully that's useful for you. That I can tell you from people who have talked to me and bought them from me and used them that they just rock stable the whole way. They do extremely well, which is why when you asked the question, I thought, this is a good one. Now there's couple of questions here about. Actually, sorry. First, I'm trying to go into order so we don't miss anyone. What about rifles that are going to have like a mag limitation that they just to be able to fit them in the magazine, they're not going to be able to get even to 50 thou. They're going to have a longer jump than that. How do your bullets deal with that?
Everybody has that problem, regardless of the bullet that they use. There are many high BC bullets that. If they are fed into a magazine, and they will be sitting a long way off the lands, and that doesn't just apply to our bullets. That's a universal problem. We have a front band that is integrated into the O drive, and there is some amount of play there. Some manufacturers do produce ridiculously long throats where we can't reach that ideal jump. But nobody else can either.
Yeah.
Not and feed it through the magazine. So your options then become much more problematic in that you can take it down to a gunsmith and shorten your barrel up and have it rechambered to a more standard chamber and throat jump. And this conversation becomes very much more complex when you're dealing with full bore and F-class shooters who have got very long throats.
Yes.
But that approach is dealt with, I think, is probably outside the context of this conversation. Is there an approach that can be used? Yes. But we'd only confuse the issue by introducing that one tonight, I think.
Sure. Yeah, if that's, I mean, for any of these questions, if you want to go deeper and you're thinking about running OEPs and you want to get the word, details that, the Outer Edge Projectile, as the Outer Edge Projectiles website and get in touch with Steve, because no doubt he may have documents written there. He may have information. I mean, he's got a huge amount of information there. So you can follow up a lot of this stuff, or call the guy. He's in this country. That's one of the real benefits about Outer Edge Projectiles, is that they are, Steve is approachable, and you can talk to him about your project, as I said at the top of the show. There's a question here which talks about how critical barrel twist, but also barrel length, is for your projectiles and matching those together. Does barrel length matter in this equation?
To us specifically, no. The barrel length doesn't impose any more problems or challenges to us as a bullet manufacturer than it does anybody else. Mm-hmm. All right. The issue comes down to the harmonics of the barrel. Again, another rabbit warren. Yeah. But the harmonics of the barrel have what everybody would refer to or know or understand as a nodal point, and that nodal point has to be achieved with load development, and our bullets are no different to anybody else's in that regard. The most critical issue when choosing an OEP bullet is just simply saying, look, I've got an X or a Y twist barrel. I must therefore have an X or a Y twist bullet. But again, that's not unique to our product. That's actually universal. It's just that we're one of the few manufacturers that says so. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of manufacturers out there who don't specify this stuff, and you go up there and you go, oh shit, look at the BC on that. That's absolutely fantastic. I'll have that one. And you find that you can't get a stable load or an optimal accurate load simply because your twist isn't up to handling that projectile, and they didn't tell you on the box. We do.
Yeah, that's I think that's one of the, when I'm putting things up, and I've been doing that on the website this week, and yours just has twist rates for every minimum recommended twist rates, and it seems many other manufacturers only really specify that when it might be a big problem. When things get really heavy or something along those lines. So, it's fascinating.
Yeah, twist rate is actually critically important. Mm. It's just that most manufacturers don't talk about it. Yep. And the twist rate is a dependent variable. Mm-hmm. It is dependent on the relationship and the ratio between a bullet's length, a bullet's weight, the barrel, and the velocity that you're able to achieve. Yep. So you might be able to get away with a slightly slower twist and a faster cartridge with a longer barrel than you would using the same barrel, using the same bullet in a lower velocity cartridge. In other words, you might get away with, say, 127 or 122 grain 6.5 and a 6.5 284 in a copper bullet that you might not get away with in the Creedmoor because it's just not quite got enough steam.
Got it. Interesting one from Sheldrake here. If money was no issue, how do you believe that something like gold would work to make projectiles out of? Theoretically, I guess.
Wow.
Have you ever thought of that? Because you have to come on. You have.
I have actually.
Good.
I have actually, only out of pure maths and theory.
Yep.
Look, the higher the specific gravity, the more latitude you have in terms of improving a bullet's momentum, and it does influence positively BC. Mm-hmm. But the other qualities of the material would just wipe it out. It's too soft. There are too many other qualities about it that even if you could afford it, money, no object, it would be less than ideal.
Gotcha. All right, good. Question on barrel life. I think there's been a couple of questions about barrel life. One particularly running your bullets, and do they factor in any more with barrel life, positive or negative? And also about the faster burn rate on the powder. Does that degrade barrels quicker or slower?
That's these are intelligent questions. They're fantastic.
Good.
I'm really inspired by them, actually.
Yeah.
There are three components to barrel wear.
Mm-hmm.
Some you can do something about, some there's not much you can do about. The first issue is the intensity and duration of the powder burn. The second one is the amount of carbon residue left. Diamonds are made of carbon, one of the hardest materials known to man. The more carbon you leave behind in the barrel throat, the more sandblasting you're going to do to your throat. So going from a slower powder to a faster powder has the potential benefit of reducing carbon residue. Mm-hmm. And whilst it does increase your flame intensity, it reduces flame duration and actually maximizes powder performance by consuming it all, or as close as possible to all the powder, as opposed to spilling slow burning powders out the end. Mm-hmm. And the other one is a little bit more complex. You're going to have to bear with me for a moment because it is an important one. The next really important issue is barrel heat and friction. Yep. Now, a conventional or a traditional jacketed lead bullet has a WMK. Now, WMK is nothing more than a scientific measurement of a material's capacity to transfer and absorb heat.
Okay. Yep.
Now, a traditional bullet has a WMK that is lower than steel. So you have a certain amount of frictional wear and heat being generated by the projectile passing down the barrel. Yep. Because the thermal transfer of a traditional bullet is lower than steel, more of the frictional heat is being absorbed by the steel than the bullet. Copper has a heat transfer rate that is 4 times that of steel.
Right. Okay.
So when the bullet is moving down the barrel, the heat and the wear generated by a copper bullet, 80% of that heat is being absorbed by the copper bullet, not the steel barrel. And this is very easily verifiable by managing. If you can run 2 tests with the same rifle, start them both from cold and use one of those electronic thermometers and just test the difference in the barrel heat, and you'll be astonished.
Mm.
Does that reduce barrel wear?
Mm.
It has the potential to. It certainly does, but it really still comes down to how much you abuse your barrel. Are you firing a large number of shots very quickly?
Yep.
That is still going to have an influence. Mm-hmm. Ours will be in a better position in terms of wear, but that's very difficult to quantify or qualify.
Yeah, it's a factor amongst many. Makes it hard to quantify without spending a lot of money on research. It probably isn't worth what there's. I'm sure there's other things like gold projectile research. You could probably spend more money on that. So we'll go down that path first. At this stage,
I have exported bullets, not to the US. Mm-hmm. Predominantly, each time I go to export product, and I've exported them on a number of occasions to New Zealand and to Southern Africa. Yep. We've had great results in both locations, but every time I turn around, the paperwork requirement to export bullets becomes a monumental mountain, which means that the economic viability of doing it means that ever larger volumes are required, and most of the customers that are acquiring them in these locations can't substantiate the volumes. But yes, the guys over there love them, absolutely love them, but it's getting harder at the moment. So, and to be honest,
especially in the moment,
our primary focus is the Australian market, and to be honest, I'd much rather serve the Australian market than any other if I've got a choice.
Yep.
If ever I become big enough to meet world demand, well, yeah, wonderful. But
Happy days.
certainly, yeah, I'm not there now.
No problem, mate. No problem. Have you experimented with compressed copper projectiles? I don't even know what compressed copper is. I assume it's just copper that's compressed. I'm sure you're aware of its existence.
A more technical term for compressed copper is actually copper powder, which has been sintered. Sintered copper powder basically is very fine granules of powder compressed into a die.
Yep.
And then it's pressed in. It's placed into an oven at different temperatures, and it is the temperature that is applied to it is designed to melt and fuse the outside of the copper to give it a hard surface so it can handle the transition down the barrel. But a large number of experiments have been done by other people to produce that variable results with that product, so that it will completely disintegrate on an in an indoor target range. So there's one design parameter which is designed to be effective at about 10 meters, so that it will completely disintegrate on a metallic target for combat training for the MLE market. Okay. That's one design parameter. There are sintered metal products out there which work. The Barnes TNT is a classic example of it. It works reasonably well, although their version of it is just the powder jammed into a copper cup.
Yep.
There are others that are designed for more longer range, but the reality is you've got a powder and you've got air gaps between the powders, between the powder particles, and it's outside the scope of what we believe to be medium and long range application.
Okay. Yeah, fantastic, mate. Steve, I've got one last question for you, and I'm sorry if we're going to miss anyone's in there, but guys, if you've got further questions, hit Steve up, or perhaps we'll get him back on there if there's a few. But it is in terms of if someone is going to go and get your projectiles, I know, but it'd be good to put it out there that the load data that you would use is not necessarily the load data you would grab out of like the ADI book for the same weight projectile, because they're longer, they're different. There's load data available on your website, but give us a bit of an indication of sort of why it's different.
Okay, basically because of the volume weight ratio differences between copper and traditional product, we do tend to use, but not always, slightly faster powders, normally 1-up. Mm-hmm. So if you used to use 2209, you may still be using 2209, but there's a high probability that 08 might be recommended, or if you're used to using 08, you might see a recommendation there for 06H.
Yep.
And that comes down to the amount of energy that you can fit. Commercial barrel length availability. So a lot of 243s, for instance, are either 20 or 22 inch, 22.24 inch, if you're looking at a ticket, that kind of stuff.
Yep.
So the load recommendations that we make are for the common commercial barrel lengths. Mm-hmm. A lot of people tend to be using powders that were designed for optimal performance, but that optimal performance was typically developed in longer barrels, mm-hmm. which is now no longer achievable in a shorter lightweight hunter. So the recommendation for faster powders is a reflection of the weight of the bullet and the common barrel lengths that are frequently used for maximum performance, rather than some intrinsic need to use a different powder because you're using copper.
Yep.
It's really an efficiency evaluation that we make. And there's a bucket load of load data for all the common cartridges on our website. Mm-hmm. And every now and then I do get a request for support for a customer who's got a cartridge that isn't on there,
Yep.
and we'll sit down and develop something with them for them.
Yeah, fantastic. Yeah, that's actually I think we've covered one of the questions in the chat about that. But yeah, fantastic. Steve, mate, I'm seeing in the chat already, and we've seen a few comments about that. But they're saying guys are saying they learn a lot. I've learnt a lot, and I've already done a few shows with you standing next to me explaining all this. So it is I really appreciate your time tonight. I really appreciate you coming on board. But we've got one big announcement that we need to, or that you need to talk about, and this is really exciting. And I've already put up the link to Projectile Warehouse with Outer Edge stock all there. But tell us a little bit. Well, we've been talking, you and I, and I'm sure with other people over a number of months of sort of how Outer Edge, being that it's Australian and the product's reputation is excellent. How can we get it used in more competitions? And mate, I'll hand it over to you to sort of talk about that journey.
Okay, thank you, Rusty. Well, yes, it's taken a couple of weeks, hasn't it, sitting down working out the factors that are important. Our bullets are performing stunningly, and bullet performance is not in question. We're competitive against. We'll put our product performance up against the best of anybody. We've got no problems there. Mm-hmm. But what a lot of people were saying, the impediment seemed to be cost. Being copper being more expensive than lead, of course, the cost of the projectiles seemed to be a barrier for people to try them.
Yep.
And we sat down internally, my partner and I, and looked at where the costs were, where the challenges were in getting the cost down and therefore the price down. And then we examined the supply chain, particularly with people like you, and saw where costs were duplicated, and came up with, we've come up with a program now where I believe that we can be more than competitive with any of the volume product that's now available, or if it is available, in the market. We've looked at how we can improve that, and what we've come up with is a drop ship program for and on behalf of Projectile Warehouse, where we will bulk pack product in bags of 500 and drop ship them directly to Projectile Warehouse's customer. And the cost that strips out has enabled us to make our pricing extremely competitive. And I sat down with Rusty as late as yesterday looking at the prices we'd be able to produce on that. And we can actually now produce for the majority of the 18 products that we can offer in that basket at a price that is now lower than many of our competitors.
Yeah.
And given that the overseas importers have just announced a 15% price increase on all the stuff coming in the next week or two, we will be substantially cheaper.
Yeah.
Although I'm not sure that price is actually the motivation. I think it's just a hurdle to remove.
I think you're right, mate. And in talking with you in the coming previous weeks, and I mean, it's been actually really exciting, Steve, talking with you for months and seeing your, recognising a market where your projectiles would be excellent, obviously in the PRS, the long range world, and they're present, but price has been a factor, not the only thing, because people will pay for good performance, and these perform really, really well. But and then when I tell you guys who are watching, when Steve was telling me the price yesterday, I'm like, oh wow, this is. I mean, you are. Now it's not a matter of, should I go premium and spend the money on the OEPs? It's like, well, now these are the same price. These are in the ballpark. In fact, they're at the front of the ballpark. So that is a credit to you to look at your business and see what you can do to benefit your customers and get your products out there. And in the market at the moment is obviously going to hopefully be stacked in your favour. And I believe, and we were talking about this on Monday night with Chris when he was on, about supporting a lot of Australian manufacturers and stuff. So perhaps this is a great opportunity. So guys, as Steve was saying, 500 packs of some of the projectiles, like compared to their full price version, it's 40-something% off, which is madness. But I mean, I hope you don't have to sell your house, Steve. Like this, that's really good, mate. But no, I'm excited that you guys have spent the time to do that and to support the shooters. And I know you were so, like I see at the shows, you're so passionate about the shooters as well. And yeah, it's really good, mate. We're running out of time. I really appreciate being on there, guys. The Projectile Warehouse, everything is up on there now, and of course the code, because then we'll jump on board and give 5% off at Projectile Warehouse as well. And that is ID Live number 5, ID LIVE 5. So you can grab a little bit extra. So, but that is an ongoing promotion as well. The idea is to get this in the hands of the target shooters, the guys who are shooting PRS. And if you're into hunting, check out the BBTs, especially BBTs, but the hollow points as well. And we'll have to save an explanation of the BBTs into the next episode, because by the looks of the chat, mate, you were coming back, whether you enjoyed it or not, because there is a lot of positive comments. So, mate, Steve, thanks so much, guys. Thanks for watching, and we will be back onto it tomorrow night. Little less information heavy tomorrow night. A few more beers and drinks kicking around, I bet. So we'll relax for Friday night. But Steve, thanks so much, man. We've covered heaps, and I look forward to getting you back on the show.
Thanks very much for your support, fellas.
No worries, guys. All right, guys. Thanks very much for watching, and jump on the website, have a little look through, and guys, after that, I think we're going to have to get Steve back on the show. So we'll do that for another Thursday night reloading session, and maybe because he knows so much about his product and projectiles, but he actually knows so much about reloading as well. So maybe we might even swing a little bit more into some of the more reloading questions that you guys have, particularly in terms of performance and getting the most from it. But we'll hook that up another time, guys. Have a wonderful evening, and we'll catch you again soon.
Hey, pretty baby, pretty baby. Don't